Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Conversations on Groong episode. In a moment, we'll be joined by Lenna Hovanessian, who is a board member of the ANC Western Region, to talk about the aftermath of the August 8 meeting in the White House between Nikol Pashinyan, Ilham Aliyev, and Donald Trump as it applies to the cause of Artsakh, the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh Armenians, and other concerns of the Armenian diaspora. But first, Hovik has something he wants to talk to you about.
And I believe not just Tovik, but I talk for both of us
Yes, you
when I
do.
say thank you for following us. Thank you for liking, commenting on our podcast, and thank you for actually offering monetary support as well. We're the only English language independent podcast focused on Armenia and the region. And we thank you for the trust to cover stories that others overlook. So to keep doing that, we need more of your support. We have had a lot of people who have contributed to us in the past. And if you haven't supported yet, but you want to and you can, then go to podcasts.groong.org/donate and become a sustaining member. You can choose Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and whatever other options that are available out there. And if donating isn't possible, then you can still help us by commenting, liking, and sharing our shows with your friends and colleagues online. That visibility strengthens our voice against well-funded lobbying machines. And we're going to be talking about that today as well. So thank you, and on with the show.
Lenna Hovanessian, welcome to the Groong podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Hello, Lenna. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So, Lenna, as this is your first time on our show, please tell us and our audience a little bit more about yourself, your activities, your interests, and your areas of expertise.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here today to discuss some important topics. My background, I'm an attorney licensed in California and Nevada. I have a background in litigation and also working for the United States District Court in the Central District of California. Most recently, I've been involved in the last decade in human rights advocacy and Armenian cause as ANC Nevada, leading the ANCA Nevada as co-chair, and also now on the ANC Western Region board. Some of the highlights of the things I've been able to do as far as policy have been to work on, draft, and pass Armenian genocide education legislation in the state of Nevada in 2021. To really build, I would say, an advocacy machine within the state and create a large footprint for our growing Armenian population, whether it was in government relations, media, or through the legal background that I have and expertise to bring that to the legislation. And then most recently, I've been promoted or, put on the ANC Western Region board. And also through my strong connections with the Nevada congressional delegation, as well as the state and local, but specifically through the Nevada congressional delegation with the leadership of Congresswoman Titus, had some influence as far as the Armenian Genocide Education Act in 2024 and now being reintroduced in 2025, as well as the first ever Azerbaijan Sanctions Review Act, which was a precedent-setting, sanctions bill against the Azeri officials for committing human rights violations, and also for naming the Artsakh leadership and the political prisoners within that bill as a lever. So that's sort of in a nutshell my background, but we can get deeper into the questions. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's begin with the questions then. Obviously, the most response generating issue over the last month has been the August 8th meeting, where Nikol Pashinyan and Ilham Aliyev met with Donald Trump at the White House. And initial documents that they have called, or the media has called, agreements, peace agreement, and so forth. But what our guests have referred to as memoranda and just declarations. We haven't, even the details that have been disclosed so far attest to that fact. Now, on the show, we have often examined how the proposed corridor that they are envisaging through Armenia would undermine its sovereignty. And today, we actually want to focus on what was missing from all those discussions in Washington, which is any mention of Artsakh, the rights of Artsakh Armenians, who were ethnically cleansed from their homeland in 2020 war and also September 2023. And instead, what happened in the White House was that Pashinyan accepted the dissolution of the OSCE Minsk group, effective this month, effective September 1st. And at the same time, Aliyev secured from Trump a waiver of Section 907, which opens the door to arms sales or restarting arms sales to Azerbaijan. So we have deep concerns about this. I know the ANCA has voiced concerns and the ANCA Western region as well. How are you viewing the outcome of the August 8th meeting so far? What was the ANC's reaction to Pashinyan's visit to the White House?
Well, I can speak to, of course, the ANC reaction, my personal reaction, having worked in Armenian advocacy for the last decade and really working hard to get our community represented through U.S. national policy for the benefit of Armenia and Armenian causes and human rights, of course. So I would say that this 17-point declaration that was initialed by both Pashinyan, Prime Minister Pashinyan, and Aliyev has many glaring and remarkable omissions. And I've had a chance to look deeper into the implementation of the route, but let's go to what's missing. And what's missing in this, there are glaring omissions. So let's start with there is no mention of any of the rights of the Artsakh Sea, Nagorno-Karabakh. There's no mention of the right of return. There is no mention about the release of hostages. There's nothing about the preservation of cultural heritage. This is the elephant in the room. And what happens is that this is a game changer, yes, but what it does is, in effect, it erases through, once it is signed, it has the impact of erasing the rights of the Armenians of Artsakh, the right of return. These are things that Armenians have fought for. We've been advocating for in the United States, internationally. The Swiss parliament has passed legislation about the right of return. And what it does is it undermines years and years of advocacy and really damages the right of return for the Artsakh Armenians. Beyond that, it doesn't protect the cultural heritage, the priceless treasures of Christian Armenian heritage that go back to the 4th, 5th century, that are early Christendom. This is the cradle of Christianity. Furthermore, I think one of the most obvious things that could have been done, and this should have been a precondition, there should have been a non-starter without the specific mention of release of Armenian hostages, Artsakh leaders. We see other countries that are in the Middle East advocating for their hostages. Not one word. And I think from a negotiating standpoint, I wasn't in the room, obviously, but when you're negotiating a deal of this level, not to have, at least symbolically, to show some level of reciprocity, the release of hostages is quite appalling for our community. I mean, these Artsakh leaders, as we all know, are being subject to sham trials and being paraded in front of the Armenian community globally. That is a humiliation for all of us. And not to have that as a precondition, as a non-starter, is really a big problem.
You know, Lenna, one thing that was interesting, we saw some video where President Trump actually offered Pashinyan to get the 23 Christian leaders back, I think, or something like that. And Pashinyan was deer in the headlights, did not know how to respond. It took him a moment to recover from that unexpected thing and basically said he didn't want that. He didn't want that.
Well, he also said, yeah, he didn't want that written down
in the agreement. Yeah,
agreement, right?
So that was shocking to all of us.
Right. He said that it would complicate matters, that Artsakh issues are a threat to national security. But if you're not negotiating for your most patriotic leaders, people like Ruben Vardanyan, who had no benefit to putting himself in Artsakh, he's given so much to Armenia through the IDEA Foundation, through so many initiatives in Artsakh and Armenia. He went and put himself at risk in order to fight as a national hero. And our ANCA Western region awarded him as a national hero in our gala last year. But for the patriots, there is actually no leverage. This was basically the major leverage that we had. I mean, we hear over and over again, Armenia has nothing to offer, but guess what? We had the Panama Canal. This was our quote unquote Panama Canal, a major route through Syunik. Turkey and Azerbaijan have been wanting this for 30 years, definitely for the last decade, labeling it the Zangezur corridor. And if you had this major lever of power, if you did not negotiate at this moment the most critical and important fact, I would even say that this would have been a major win for Pashinyan if he could have, gotten those hostages released. It would have been a major political win. And we all know that, who won from this deal. Well, before I go to that, I'm going to also mention there's other issues that are problematic within this peace agreement or peace deal or declaration. I would say that the having to discard or to get rid of all the International Court of Justice, European Court of Human Rights cases, I mean, this is basically another lever of power. So what I'm seeing here, if we look at just the face of it, is that you're starting to defang or take away any levers of little power that Armenia has. The European Court of Human Rights cases, the ICJ cases that were very instrumental to my advocacy and ANCA's advocacy in 2023 during the blockade in February and July. These cases are major cases that gave us some kind of accountability on the international platforms to hold Azerbaijan accountable. Mm-hmm. Now those cases are going to be gone, diminished, dismissed, and erase war crimes, major cases against through CERD, which is the it's for elimination of racial bias and hate that was proudly on display. And all of us saw the torture videos of POWs, civilians, soldiers, executions of female soldiers, all of those things. Yeah, wiped, absolutely. Clean, war crimes. I mean, how can that not be an insult to just equality, reciprocity? There's none of that, unfortunately.
Lenna, do you think that Pashinyan even has the right to give up on these global cases for the Armenian nation?
Well, I was thinking about that. I think that the ones that are brought through the ICJ, which were brought by the Armenian government, those there is standing, I would say, in order to bring that case, I would say possibly yes. However, on the European Court of Human Rights cases, which are brought by civilians through, I know, Siranush Sahakyan and other attorneys that were brought, those are individual cases. So I would question whether there is standing or authority to get those cases dismissed. Obviously, other measures could be used to pressure for that to happen.
And also, genocide doesn't have a statute of limitations, as far as I know. So Artsakh being a case of genocide, ethnic cleansing is a nice Western way of saying genocide. Is this a case that you can just dismiss and say, it didn't happen?
Right. Absolutely. I think the other thing that's troubling to me, besides the legal cases and what you mentioned earlier, was Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act, because our advocacy, our community hangs on to any lever of power that we have in this situation where Armenia is really on its back foot after all the things that happened, the 44-day war on Artsakh, the blockade, the ethnic cleansing, genocide of Artsakh. Yes, Armenia is not in a powerful position, but to take away and suspend Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act, that was a bill that was fought for and had teeth. It had teeth. It was, in place since the early 90s. Of course, it was waived, almost 10 years after that subsequently, but then it was enforced. That section was enforced for the last 3 years. And when you look at some of the footage of the agreement in, the footage in Washington, D.C. from the recent August 8th, meeting, you can see how much delight Aliyev shows when he knows that he says for over 20 years, we've not been able to engage in, military aid through the United States. And he sees that as a major win. Well, if you're giving that major win to Azerbaijan, to Aliyev, what are you getting in return? And I think that is the real big question here is, what is Armenia, not the prime minister getting in return. We know that the prime minister is going into an election in 2026. This is a feather in his cap, ostensibly, but it really questions whether we're just rebranding the Zangezur corridor as TRIP, and in effect having the same risks, major risks, and concessions.
You are spot on, and the analysts that we've talked to have actually said that there's nothing here for the Armenians. There's almost everything here that Azerbaijan has demanded, and yeah, this is why, by the way, we don't call it negotiations on this show. We call it a managed capitulation is what's going on.
Absolutely, and I would even take it a step further. I would say this is a foreign policy of appeasement. It's a foreign policy of appeasement. Let's not mask it any other way. It's like, you give away Artsakh, it's not enough. And if you notice, now the goalposts are being moved. It's being moved, instead of going back and holding them accountable for something that war crimes and genocide that has already occurred. As a negotiation, the anchoring principle here comes at play. I mean, of course, we're dealing with President Trump, who's about the deal, right? It's about the deal. And so President Trump has said a bad deal, no deal is better than a bad deal. In this case, I think what happened with this Pashinyan and his entourage is they wanted any deal is better than no deal. So they could take that home. And I would say that the details of this declaration are troubling. But I will, just to be fair, I do want to talk, because I've listened to many interviews and read a lot of articles, and I wanted to be fair in my assessment of what could be the gain for Armenia. And I want to put them out there because, I want to be objective. I really want to be positive and objective, but I'll say there are two things that I was observed that could be the upside of this. One would be that they bought time. Time was bought against, being attacked. Apparently, the actual deal is not going into effect until 2028. That's a lot of years. You buy time. There's a deterrence effect, let's say, okay? But the troubling response to that is that when you look at the defense spending and the announcement of the defense spending, Aliyev has increased his defense spending. Now it's up to $5 billion, and he increased it by, I think, $750 million. And you see an announcement by Prime Minister Pashinyan saying that there will be no increase in defense spending. So you bought the time. Why are you not beefing up your defense spending? Because that's what you're supposed to do with the time, aren't you? To defend the country. So that's one aspect of that.
Yeah. Lenna, I also want to ask you about what you're seeing. We've heard Tom Barak mention 99-year lease. Trump has been talking about 99-year lease. Pashinyan and his team are saying there is no such thing as a lease, and it's not for 99 years, or they're not, well, they didn't say it's not for 99 years. They've been very vague about it. And when the actual memoranda were publicized, there was nothing about neither like the number of years or the specific details of whether it's a corridor or not. So how would you address those that we get criticized because we say that this is a 99-year lease, and to be honest, there's nothing publicized, but Trump and that doesn't stop Trump from using the 99-year length. So how do we interpret what actually happened? Are there some other agreements that we're not privy to?
That's a great question. I think the other troubling aspect of this deal is that there's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of details that are not worked out that don't work in Armenia's favor. And I would say, too, that I've heard a lot of rhetoric, and I would say maybe propaganda, saying that this deal, TRIP, specifically offers some type of security guarantees to Armenia. There is nothing in the letter of that document, that declaration, that talks about any kind of military and security guarantees, period. There's none of that. So to promote
isn't Trump's phone number a good enough security guarantee?
Yeah, seriously.
When you're being attacked.
Right. Well, I mean,
it's sort of similar to when Armenians, when Azerbaijan took over the Goriskapan highway, the Armenian National Security Service was passing around a phone number saying, hey, if you ever get stopped by Azerbaijanis or if you get kidnapped, this is a number to call. But
If they
it
ever
seems
kill you, call us.
Yes,
yes.
exactly. Well, look, we don't have the luxury of wishful thinking, and I like to be optimistic in general when it comes to, we want peace. Armenians want peace. Like, let's not, that is obviously our objective here. And so I'm not saying that attempts towards peace are not worthy, honorable, but there has to be some type of balance. And if there's not balance, there has to be a gain. And as I said, if you're giving a Panama Canal type of access route that has been dreamt of, and it is a game changer, and you're inserting the United States into Syunik. And, Syunik is a hot button, important point. It is our major transit route from Iran, and where we get a lot of it is a major security compromise. And although Armenia and Pashinyan and this, it's being promoted as only a commercial, a commercial joint venture with the United States, with a lot of the details left out. What's important is that it's at a very critical point. And if we've ever seen it before in other aspects, whenever you give access and opportunity to somebody who's going through a transport corridor like the Lachin corridor, what did Azerbaijan do? They used it as a choking point, and they basically created a blockade. And so any type of risk, there's access and opportunity for that risk. Now, speaking about the joint venture between the United States and Armenia in building and managing the trip route, major issues of concern. I mean, there's obviously so many details that are left out. Who is going to be the third party contractor or operator? I mean, can't we see this as sort of like an opportunity for a Trojan horse? I mean, this is a Trojan horse because you don't have control over the third party, or they say, okay, Armenia has a say over the third party, manager or controller. But at the same time, Azerbaijan is already saying, we don't want to interface with any Armenia security or border people at Armenia's border. They've demanded that.
That is basically the whole thing, where Azerbaijan, which has been getting so far everything at once, is saying that you can be sure that we will never see another Armenian. Armenian officials are being vague about it. Like, even after this trip signing, Pashinyan, I think he was asked once, and Arat Mirzoyan was asked twice, are the Azerbaijanis going to be inspected? Are we going to be inspecting Azerbaijani passports? And each time there's a vague answer, essentially a non-answer, but Aliyev at the same time continues to insist that Azerbaijanis will not see an Armenian face. So how does that work? How do you defend that type of a deal? I'm not sure.
Right. This is supposed to be a commercial transit corridor, right? What the obvious problem here is the transportation of weapons or other, things that could happen along the route. Whether it's spying by a third party operator, because this is, again, we're talking about a very sensitive border to the south of, with Iran. And there are all kinds of geopolitical interests in order to opportunities for that to happen, and for Armenia to be used as a geopolitical hot point is really we already have enough problems. And so I would say the Trojan horse analogy to me is very obvious. The only thing I have read about, from those who say that they were in the room negotiating, is that there's a setup, or a proposed setup of a front office, back office, where the third party operator would be the front office. So there would be no interfacing with Azeri and Armenian border control, and that the Armenian border control agents would be in the back office. So we're already on our own sovereign territory being told how we're going to be running our customs and border security.
Yeah, let's say there's an escalation. What does that mean? So those are like, eventually, people with guns have to be involved. So how do we? Anyway, I think I appreciate Yeah,
I agree. And also I'll add one other thing is that part of this deal also requires that there be no international, not forces, but the European observers that were put along the Armenian-Azeri border were really the only eyes, I guess, international eyes that were keeping that border safe. And we keep hearing about all the shootings that are happening into the villages that are along that border. That's a reality. And that border is getting closer and closer. We also know that there are 200 square kilometers of sovereign Armenia that are currently being occupied by Azeri forces. And that is another problem that wasn't addressed as part of this, peace declaration. I read somewhere that those are things that will become figured out as the deal is becoming finalized. But again, those should be non-starters that are the hostages and current invasions are not things that you negotiate when you've lost your lever of power in a negotiation. You negotiate that from the beginning, and it has to be a non-starter unless you get rid of those very important current invasions that are going on in the country.
Pashinyan has said they'll deal with that in the Border Commission process. And yet, we know that those things can take 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, and by then it'll be a fait accompli.
Absolutely. It's very problematic.
I've spent most of my young adulthood in the United States, and in fact, the first time that I got exposed to the issue of Artsakh was desperately looking for news about Artsakh and about the war in the 1990s. And that's how I got hooked into issues about Armenian American advocacy. And for many of us, the issue of Artsakh has been the defining moment of our identity, or defining component, foundation of our identity. And we have been advocating for the cause of Artsakh for over 35 years. And it has been hand in hand with the Republic of Armenia. And even during periods when, for instance, during Levent Petrosyan's rule, many Armenian Americans that were affiliated with a certain party were being persecuted. ANCA and Armenian Americans in general were still advocating for Artsakh. But now Pashinyan says that anything having to do with Artsakh is a security threat to Armenia, and he wants to essentially take Armenia out of that equation. Do you agree? And what are the reasons behind this glaring departure from a united stance purpose? From what can be gained from this by not being united?
Well, the Artsakh issue, as you know, we've been advocating for that in the ANC, as you said, I've been most active in the last 10 years here in Nevada, and it has been a defining moment. It has been a painful moment of loss, having to endure another genocide, psychologically and also physically, the loss of all of the people, the heritage, the ethnic cleansing. And so, yes, our community in the diaspora has been dealing with that. But I will say that, ANC has been at the front line of fighting for these issues. And if, looking at our current legislation, despite the declaration and the undermining or potential erasure of the Artsakh issues, ANCA and myself, we continue to fight for those issues, even in the current legislation through the NDAA amendments. We have a lot of support from our legislators. We had a letter that was 87 members of Congress wrote a letter about the right of return to Secretary of State Rubio. And so we continue our advocacy in the United States, especially here with the ANCA. The NDAA amendments address the issue of the right of return, the release of hostages, sanctions. These are championed by our very supportive members of Congress, including Senator Schiff, Congressman Bilirakis, and also Congresswoman Titus here from Nevada. So we have champions of our cause. The issue is not done for us. The current administration in Armenia may see it that way. And obviously it creates problematic issues for us down the line when these issues aren't addressed. Furthermore, it does really create, I don't know if this truly will create peace. And we all want peace, but a peace that is not based on any type of justice or reciprocity or any type of acknowledgement is very problematic and arguably not a really durable peace. It basically rewards aggression, war crimes, genocide, and it sets a very dangerous precedent of things to come from an international standpoint. But obviously, we're living in a world right now where these international rights aren't being held up, and it is a troubling time for the world in general. But I think as Armenian Americans, we continue with this plight and for the advocacy. And the more we can create legislation and strength from our end to advocate for these things, that's all that we can do.
And also, in the past week, Nikol Pashinyan has publicly said that Artsakhis should forget their homes, their rights, and move on, because he thinks that the Artsakh cause, he now thinks that it's a mistake. He didn't think that in 2018 when he was saying Artsakh is Armenia, and he was acting more nationalistic than some of the most nationalistic people I know. But he said he won't allow the issue to ever come back. So is it possible to advocate for Artsakh when the Armenian government itself undermines diaspora's efforts? Many of these champions that you mentioned will eventually have to deal with an ambassador of Armenia to the United States who says, please don't bring up that issue.
I agree with you. It's created a problematic stance for us as advocates. But I would say that no government is there forever. And if you let the issue die, then it will die. And you have to continue. Just like we fought for recognition of the Armenian genocide, you can argue that it didn't do anything. I would say that it did create, for those of us who are grandchildren of Armenian genocide survivors, if it gave us nothing, it gave us a sense of justice. Of course, there's the issue of reparations and all of that. And also that's an issue that stands for the Artsakhis. What about the issue of reparations? If you're taking people's personal land and also, all of those years of heritage, there needs to be some kind of accounting for all of that. So I would say that, is it problematic? Yes. Well, I would say also ANC is probably the only, except for individuals, of course, that, are strong advocates and very patriotic towards Armenia. We still continue to fight for it. Nothing lasts forever. This is a fight that goes on for the long haul, and you just have to continue because it's about persistence. And I would even say, pointing to other, nationalities around the world, other countries, I would say that through long-term persistence, passing on the message to next generations, that's how you eventually get it done. When we give up our advocacy, our fight, the knowledge and appreciation for our own history, that is the first place where we get demoralized and we lose. And I don't know if that is the objective of this government. I can't read that. But from what I see, from the teardown of institutions like the church to opposition to the advocacy for Artsakh, when you kill the issue at this point, you really diminish it for future generations. I see this as a long-term advocacy, and we must persist.
Then now you mentioned the Armenian genocide, which is itself not on safe grounds, it appears, because in the past year, Pashinyan and his foreign minister, Aragats Mirzoyan, have both stated...
Stop misnaming him. It's Arabat Mirzoyan.
But it was Pashinyan who said that we should not say Ararat anymore and just say Aragats, right?
No. For the foreign minister's name, he specifically said that we should use Agridach Mirzoyan.
Mirzoyan.
Sorry, that's okay. Yes. Let's ask him. If you know anyone, if you know the foreign minister of Armenia, ask him what he wants us to call him. Maybe let's leave it at that.
All right. We'll just say that Pashinyan and Mirzoyan have both stated that Armenia will not prioritize recognition of the Armenian genocide. And this was just this past week in reaction to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who had a personal recognizing of the Armenian genocide on the U.S. podcast. Pashinyan said that Armenia has not gained anything from international recognition of the genocide, and so it's not in the interest of Armenia to pursue this. Lena, I know you are an outspoken advocate of the recognition of the Armenian genocide, as am I, as is Hovik, and every other Armenian that we know. What was your reaction to Pashinyan's stance towards the genocide, and how do you explain it?
Well, I don't know if I can explain it. It's obviously very disappointing. It does create a feeling of what shall I say, hurt within the diaspora, and I think that he has made statements that he talks about only representing Armenia. It's the Armenia as it is, not Armenia before, not the current Armenia, and that I've heard that refrain. We've all heard that refrain. And I think it's very myopic, because if you look at other countries like Israel, and others that have a strong diaspora, you realize that the diaspora is your power, is part of your power, and to alienate or to disparage the work of Armenians globally who've been fighting for recognition and have achieved that. Look, nothing would ever change my feelings for Armenia. That nothing would change that. Armenia is, for me, it's beyond any leader, but I think it's problematic. And whether his objective is to, advance the crossroads of peace, to get along with Turkey, Azerbaijan, open borders, well, I'd like to see more of the reciprocity, because within that declaration, let's talk about the details. The declaration was supposed to have transit routes that went through Azerbaijan that would get us to the Caspian Sea, right? Like,
let's see those.
Mutual, reciprocal. So, I digress on that point, but the point is that if you're trying to reach an objective like that, then advocate for that reciprocity. It's not in the interest of Armenia to alienate a diaspora which has a lot of experience, has a lot of wealth, and wants to invest in Armenia and be there. So I find that to be divisive, and I think there's a lot more diplomatic ways that he can say that and still get along with his objectives of opening borders.
Absolutely, absolutely. But Pashinyan has been driving a wedge between the Republic and the diaspora for years, and his government cronies slam traditional diaspora institutions like the ANC and the ARF, the Armenian Church, all the time. I mean, all you have to do is open the Facebook pages, and all that drivel is right there. Just like Pashinyan's Real Armenia propaganda, though, he's also pushing for a new diaspora and trying to marginalize any organization that upholds the Armenian identity. This is something you mentioned a moment ago when he is pushing this Real Armenia thing, which is very myopic. I couldn't agree more. You are deeply involved in Armenian advocacy. How does this difficult relationship between Armenia and the diaspora affect not just the U.S., but the worldwide diaspora communities and efforts?
As you said, we're already, we fight hard, obviously, being a small population in the world and carrying a burden of our history and the pride of our history everywhere that we go. Diasporan communities through the Armenian Church and Armenian schools and other avenues and institutions have the deep respect of Armenians everywhere, because they help keep us Armenian. They help us raise our children to be Armenian and keep us, within our, keep our heritage alive. When you diminish these institutions, it's very problematic, and I think it weakens. It has the potential to weaken the strength of these institutions. And also, I've seen the labels. You can label something as pro-Russian and pro this and pro that. No. Some of us are very pro-Armenian, and we're very proud of that. And labeling us something because we stand for our Armenian heritage, our Armenian institutions, we have respect for them and love for them and dedication to them, where we volunteered decades of our life, it's insulting. I think that he needs to have he can't jail the opposition in the diaspora. He can jail the opposition who don't agree with some of the policies that he has in Armenia. But Armenia is supposed to be a democracy. So, that's troubling that, people are not able to voice their opposition to policy. In the diaspora, I guess the only way that you can do that is by slandering or labeling them as pro-Russian or whatever you want. But that does not diminish or stop our advocacy. It's unfortunate. It weakens our, I guess, to the outside world. It diminishes the solidarity of our movement. I think that unity is very strong, but unity usually comes together under strong leadership. And that's what I've seen is when there's strong leadership, even if you disagree, but you feel that even in smaller communities, I work very closely in our community organically in the last 10 years. When you have a mission and a haya serutyon, like in your heart, you have the higher purpose. People are not dumb. People understand that in your heart of hearts. And even if there's not exact agreement, people come together under that umbrella and they know that you're there for the higher purpose and the higher cause. That's what I would like to see for Armenia. When we look at leaders in the past, we've seen hints of that. And I think that type of unity or that type of leadership, whether Armenia is strong or weak, we have lived through millennia and ages. But it's because of strong leadership and that kind of patriotism that's taken us, and also our religious, our conviction towards our Christianity, our religion has taken us to survive through all kinds of incursions and challenges in the past. I think
just said that unity comes under strong leadership.
I really believe that. I've seen it in small communities. People don't mess around when they know that you're not in it for yourself, but you're in it because you really care deeply. And I have to say that, with the work that I've done through the ANCA, the people that I've worked with, and also beyond the ANCA, that type of haya serutyon, it unites us, it brings us together. And the details of this or that, I mean, we're in a generation where we move past those things and we respect those who dedicate their lives to our cause.
Azerbaijan and Turkey, with help from some other major lobbies, have invested heavily in lobbying and influence campaigns in the United States and worldwide to shape policy that, let's just put mildly, is anti-Armenian. And from time to time, we see reports of investigations into bribery or corruptions linked to, for instance, Azerbaijani lobbying. Yet few of these cases seem to result in guilty verdicts or lasting consequences. There was recently a verdict in Germany where the person got, I think, a suspended sentence and some slap on the wrist in terms of the monetary amount of fines.
That was MEP Lindner, I think.
Yeah, Lindner. There are a few others, but this raises doubts whether institutions can effectively curb this foreign influence and what that failure means for those advocating for Armenia and Artsakh. What obstacles does the Armenian American community face in countering Azerbaijan's lobbying and influence efforts? And how effective have institutions been in ensuring the accountability for their transgressions?
I would say that the Azeri laundromat, caviar diplomacy, whitewashing, sports washing, genocide washing is their playbook. And do they have the resources to do that? Absolutely. We know the geopolitical game that they play, the gas and oil diplomacy, and how that influences Europe, the Middle East, and also potentially the United States through recent, criminal cases. It's a challenge that we face. And I think that when you look at the counterbalance that has to be done for that, I think that we as a organization, as a community, let's say, can, in order to level the playing field, become a little bit more political savvy and aware. And not only that, but to put more money into political advocacy. we can see that through other communities, that they're able to influence American politics and international politics by putting a little bit more resources into that. And that can have a tremendous impact to somewhat level the playing field. But I would say, too, that we have a very strong Armenian spirit. And I think that we've been able to counter that. But I think we need to become stronger, create more sophisticated mechanisms. I will say specifically fundraising. I mean, it's, I've done some of that in the state of Nevada, but it's also been my my work as an advocate, my legal background. I've put in that resource into building the relationships, and we've done that across the country as ANCA. So I will say the recent, whether it's Eric Adams, the mayor, former mayor of New York, and whether it is ANCA-WR in Texas, who's currently being tried for, bribery, money laundering, bribery, and under FARA. The FARA convictions or the FARA allegations, I think, were dropped by the judge. But I know that the bribery, the $600,000 bribery scheme that was paid by Azerbaijan in order to influence his legislation and policy, make it anti-Armenian, pro-Azeri, specifically during the time frame of the blockade, the war on Artsakh, the 2023 blockade, had a real impact. And what the ANCA has done is basically submit a letter to the U.S. attorney who's prosecuting the case, so that when it comes to the point of sentencing, and possible, the sentencing phase, to have an impact, that this has had a real damage to the Armenian American community as a form of influencing policy. It's very problematic. We have to be aware of it. And the only way to fight it is to bring it to light, as we are right now, but also we must counter it. And I would say that if I would ask anything of our community, I would say to be more politically engaged and to invest more resources, especially to those of us who have the tools, the know-how to be able to do those things. Give us more and we'll do more with that, because there's so much more we can do. I mean, I've done it, almost single-handedly, but with community partners here in Nevada, but been able to create that kind of a footprint. And look what's come out of that. We have Armenian Genocide Education Act, spearheaded by Congresswoman Titus, the first ever Sanctions Review Act, Azerbaijan Sanctions Review Act. I mean, these are the kinds of things that we can do with even more resources.
Yeah. You mentioned ANCA-WR. We should say that he has pleaded not guilty, but do you have any expectations in terms of how fast his case will go through the courts?
I think they have a set hearing, or maybe even the trial, in next year in 2026. So it's something that's moving along. Whether there'll be a plea or something else in the case, can't predict that. But I know that our Washington, D.C. office has made requests for freedom of information to see how he's impacted and influenced the Armenian Americans and negatively impacted our advocacy for human rights. And to end the blockade during these really critical times. He was involved in that legislation, and so it had a very damaging impact. I think it brings to light those things that we need to be aware of. And, I'll say that we need, when people like this that are running for office, we need to be at the primaries. We need to be involved, whether it's through the votes that we have in swing states like Nevada, Michigan, in key elections. We should be coming out and making an impact. In states like Nevada, where we have 40,000 Armenians, we have an impact in elections, especially in these swing states. So that's something we should continue to do, and we should put more resources into advocacy.
From your experience as an attorney, what does the designation of Armenian Americans as victims of this scheme by ANCA-WR and Azerbaijan, or the alleged scheme, what would the designation of being a victim mean in terms of sentencing, during sentencing?
You mean how would it impact sentencing?
Yeah, how would it impact, what would be the mechanics? Because I think, the entire community has been, entire nation has been sort of
injured,
almost
basically.
injured. Yeah. So, how would the mechanics of that work, and also how would that affect the sentencing?
Right. Sentencing, I would think that it would prolong his sentencing and give him a longer sentence. And there was also a part about restitution. That's part of this federal crimes bill, victim crime. Yeah, it's a victim bill of these crimes. So there's a part that talks about restitution. And I think that's a great question. How do you create restitution for something that's impacted a policy? That's a very difficult question, and I would love to see how that would play out. I mean, how can you undo the damage that's happened in Artsakh through policy?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a good question. I'm not sure that I know the answer to that.
Okay, well, I really do appreciate, Lenna, your time with us today. Do you have anything to add as your final thought?
Well, I would say, yes, I do, actually. I was thinking about this, and, there were a few events leading up to the TRIP meeting, the August 8th meeting. And there were moments where, we were, as the diaspora, left in the dark. And then all of a sudden, there was this meeting in Washington, D.C. And to see the events unfold in Armenia by the attack on the Armenian church, jailing of the opposition, Samvel Karapetyan, who's a potential candidate for the 2026 elections, unfold. Really, we got this feeling in the diaspora that something was going on. At least I did. And when I heard the ambassador to Turkey, Tom Barak, start talking about the corridor, or the
99-year lease.
99-year lease, or let's just call it the Zangezur corridor, or I guess it's different because we have sovereignty over it. But I think what really disturbed me the most, and I knew where we were going, is when he talked about the 43-kilometer road as no big deal. He made it like, what's the big deal? And then talked about our rights as tribal, that we would have like a tribal. He used the word tribal. And I think it made me think about American history. As an Armenian American, it made me think about Manhattan. Manhattan was bought for a string of pearls. And it's a real marginalization. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't smell right. And it really feels a bit racist towards our people, and to talk about our rights as tribal, and minimizes our rights. It also minimizes what we're giving up with the TRIP corridor. And if you're going to give up something that is so valuable and so potentially problematic as far as a security issue, then in return, I really felt that we needed to get much more from this deal. And it feels like it's a very one-sided concession. We should have at least had the optics of having hostages released. I wanted to see those hostages coming out of an airplane, or something to show to the Armenian community in the diaspora that something positive was going to come out of this. And unfortunately, we didn't have that moment. And it doesn't feel like there was any justice done here, or that the negotiation was done with any level of real gain for the Armenian side. And so that, we're willing to say that, you were on the losing end of this deal. You needed to concede something so they wouldn't attack you and force that Zangezur corridor. If we buy into that, then we made a major concession. I don't care how you want to rebrand it or propagandize that, but it was very important to have at least the optics and the feeling of having at least 1 or 2 or 23 of those hostages released. Let's not misconceive or think that after you've already negotiated the most important aspects of the deal, that you would, after the deal is done, the declaration made that you're going to get any type of concession or hostage released after the fact. Now that the International Red Cross is no longer present, that they have basically been kicked out of Azerbaijan since September 2nd, that those poor hostages, those 23 prisoners, the Artsakh leaders who are now attempting suicide. I've read from Siranush Sahakyan's report that they're attempting suicide. They have lost hope. So it is not only like a bad deal, but it's a demoralizing deal. And that's really problematic to us as our community, for our spirit. And I would, mhm.
You know, I think behind closed doors, Aliyev has told Pashinyan he will concede nothing, zero, and he will get everything, 100%. And they can manage it the way they want it, whatever, put lipstick on a pig or whatever you want, but he will give absolutely nothing. That's why not even a single prisoner was. I mean, those prisoners, I realize some of the ones that were taken after September 2023, that's one thing, and that's the leadership of Artsakh. But all the other prisoners were taken during the 44-day war. Those were all supposed to be an all-for-all exchange according to the ceasefire agreement that was signed in November of 2020. None of them came home because Pashinyan just shipped everybody like an idiot to Azerbaijan, after which Aliyev decided, well, I don't have to give you anything. I have what I need. So that's what happened. And may I say one more thing, Lenna, before I close? About the tribal comment from Tom Barrack, that is an absolute 100% Turkish and Azeri narrative that Armenians are a tribal people who didn't have a state or a republic or anything throughout history, and they've just settled in the lands that are today, Eastern Turkey and today's Armenia and parts of Azerbaijan and Iran. So
Point well
that's
taken.
what's going on.
I agree with you 100%. And I think that, if we look at post-agreement, the rhetoric coming from Aliyev at the Shanghai summit, because watching his rhetoric, it should have changed, right? Because now we were supposed to be in the peace phase, but he went back to calling it the Zangezur corridor. And so it shows a real disregard for the progress that was supposed to be made, and also the allegations that he's fearful of Trump. I mean, that was sort of supposed to be the lever. Okay, there's no security guarantees in writing. There's no guarantor. America is not the guarantor. America has a commercial benefit out of this trip deal. Let's not call it a guarantor, because they're not. They're a joint venturer. There's a commercial and economic gain from this. Let's not call it what it's not. And wishful thinking is dangerous, because,
as far as I could tell,
yeah,
America was a witness to the two talking to each
absolutely
other in the White House. That's what it was.
It was.
And
That's
as for
fine.
Aliyev, he's a hate-filled schmuck, as far as I'm concerned. I'll go on the record on my show saying this, because he's called Armenians dogs and other things. So I don't think that there is any doubt about what he is towards Armenians. All right, I'm going to leave it there for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Lenna. And we look forward to talking with you again in the future when there are causes that we want to get out and distribute widely.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lenna.
That's our show today. This episode was recorded on September 5, 2025. We've been talking with Lenna Hovanessian, who is a board member of the Armenian National Committee of America in the Western region. For more information on the participants in this episode, check out our show notes at podcasts.groong.org/episode number.
Don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, folks. Help us get elevated on that platform. I'm Hovik Manujarian, temporarily back in Glendale.
And I'm Aspet Bedrosian, also in Glendale. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.